To begin this presentation, we wanted to take you through a quick timeline of how the horn became the instrument that it is today. During the 1500s, the horn was a much simpler instrument. It was comprised of a mouthpiece, a long piece of tubing wrapped in a circle, and ended in a flared bell. This instrument was used throughout Germany and France by hunters. The instrument could hang off of the hunter's shoulder while on horseback, and they could use their left hand to bring it to their face to communicate with other hunters. The main disadvantage to this instrument, though, was that it didn't have the ability to change keys, and it only had access to the harmonic series. This led to the invention of crooks. A crook is a segment of tubing that a performer could remove to replace with either a longer piece of tubing or shorter piece of tubing to then change the keys and give access to a different harmonic series, but still did not have access to chromatic notes. Later on, with the changing and development of the instrument, it became smaller and allowed for performers to insert their hands into the bell, and around 1750, a new technique was developed called the hand horn. This allowed the performer to manipulate the pitch by covering either halfway or fully to gain access to all the chromatic notes. The next greatest development in the horn was the valve horn in 1814 by German instrument maker Heinrich Stölzl, but was not fully accepted until the late 19th century. Another contribution is the Vienna horn in 1823. Created and popularized in Vienna, Austria. Still used today, this instrument has its own valve system and it retains a lot of features similar to the natural horn. Another great contribution to the horn world was the Wagner tuba, invented in 1853. This instrument was designed and created by Richard Wagner to fill in the space between the horn and the trombone. Now we'd like to cover composers that contributed massively to horn repertoire and literature. Starting with Beethoven, we have many orchestral excerpts and also a sonata that he wrote in 1800. Beethoven was not exposed to the valved horn until the last few years of his life, and so wrote primarily for the natural horn. Next, we have Carl Maria von Weber, and specifically looking at his operatic work, Der Freischütz. Throughout this opera, he uses the horn many times with many different characters. These excerpts range from melodic content, like the quartet in the overture, to a reflection of the instrument's past in the hunter's chorus. Next, we have Wagner. Perhaps his most famous excerpt comes from his opera Siegfried, which reflects on the horn's history as a hunting instrument. As discussed earlier in the timeline, Wagner is also extremely essential for the horn world by providing us another instrument, the Wagner tuba. This instrument is played by horn players and is designed to fill in the sound gap between the horn and the trombone. Under this category of progressive composers who preferred to use the valved horn and the Wagner tuba, we also find Bruckner. Now, in opposition to these composers, we have Franz Strauss, a virtuosic and prolific horn player during the 19th century. Although publicly known as a music conservative, Franz Strauss nevertheless performed in many of the premieres of Wagner's operas. Alongside Franz, we find Brahms. Famously known for being a music conservative as well, that extends to the world of horn. Brahms was a horn player himself. During his earlier childhood years, he learned how to play the natural horn, and throughout his adult years still maintained that love and affinity for the instrument. Perhaps one of his greatest contributions, aside from orchestral excerpts to horn chamber music, is his horn trio. He composed this trio shortly after the death of his mother and was the last chamber piece that he composed for 8 years. Brahms was very adamant that this composition should be played on the natural horn and not on the valved horn. He firmly believed that the natural horn was superior in sound and was the only instrument that could portray his musical concepts.
Moving from Germany to Russia, we find Tchaikovsky. He is most well known for his symphonies, especially his last three, numbers 4, 5, and 6. They really speak to the dynamic contrast that the horn is able to achieve. Tchaikovsky used valved horns and wrote great parts spanning both the low and high ranges. There are two huge moments of contrast between his 4th and 5th symphonies, with one being the opening theme from the 4th symphony and one being the delicate horn solo. Finally, we are going to go back to the beginning of the Romantic era, to the man who, in my personal opinion, wrote some of the best horn music of all time. Robert Schumann was a prolific composer who, when writing for the horn, gained inspiration from his section and wanted to celebrate their virtuosity. In 1849, he took that idea and wrote the Concertstück for 4 horns and orchestra. This marathon of a piece was written for not one but for 4 solo horns. It utilized the full range of the horn, both low and high. This was most certainly written for valved horn due to the constant modulation.